Okay, so you want to own a football stadium, find a piece of land, pour some concrete, put in some seats, watch the ticket money roll in on match days. Sounds straightforward enough. Maybe you've been to a game, looked around at 60,000 people, done a quick calculation in your head. 60,000 tickets, $100 each, that's $6 million in a single afternoon, and thought, this is the greatest business in the world. It is not that simple. And by the time we're done here, you're going to understand exactly why. Let's start with what it actually costs to build one of these things, because most people, when they think about stadium costs, think about the seats and the field, the bowl, basically. What they don't think about is the land, the underground infrastructure, the retractable roof, the high-density Wi-Fi system, the luxury suite kitchens, the LED display systems, the security camera network, the subterranean parking structures, and the highway interchanges your city government is going to make you fund as a condition of getting planning permission. SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, home of the Rams and the Chargers, opened in 2020. It cost $5.5 billion. Not a typo. $5,500 million. For one building. That is more than some countries' annual government budgets. And SoFi is the most expensive stadium ever built, but it is not an outlier in the trend. It is just the furthest point on a curve that has been moving in one direction for 30 years. AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, home of the Dallas Cowboys, opened in 2009 with a final price tag of $1.15 billion, after originally being budgeted at $650 million. MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, where the New York Giants and Jets play, cost $1.6 billion when it opened in 2010. The Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London, which opened in 2019, came in at just over £1 billion, that is around $1.3 billion. And right now, as we are talking, Manchester United is planning a brand new stadium next to Old Trafford that is currently estimated at £2 billion, and financial experts who cover the club closely are already saying it will hit $3 billion before a single seat is bolted down. First, the land. Getting several dozen acres of contiguous urban land in a major city means buying out existing industrial leases, sometimes at absurd prices. Manchester United's land negotiations are a perfect illustration of this. A freight rail company called Freightliner owns the site next to Old Trafford that United needs, and they are reportedly demanding £400 million for it. United's original projection for that same land was around $50 million. That gap, $350 million before construction even starts, that's the land trap. Then there's construction itself. Tens of thousands of tons of structural steel, specialized concrete, the kind of cantilevered seating designs that let everyone see the pitch without giant columns blocking their view. That's not cheap to engineer. Then you add the retractable roof, because any modern stadium that wants to host concerts in the rain or NFL games needs one. And you're talking about massive steel structures running on precision rail systems powered by industrial motors. The retractable roof alone at the new Santiago Bernabeu renovation cost hundreds of millions of euros as part of a total renovation bill of $1.9 billion. Then there's technology. A modern stadium is essentially a small city that needs to stay connected. The Tottenham Hotspur Stadium was built with high-density Wi-Fi capable of supporting 60,000 simultaneous connections, thousands of point-of-sale terminals, massive LED display systems running around the entire interior, a dedicated broadcast compound with fiber optic routing and stable high-voltage power. None of this is cheap. None of it is optional if you want to compete for major events. And then there are the VIP facilities. A modern luxury suite is not a row of seats behind glass. It's a private restaurant with a 5-star kitchen. It's climate control, premium interior design, a private bar, concierge service. Because the people paying for those boxes are comparing your stadium to other corporate hospitality experiences across the city, and if you want them to pay the prices we're about to discuss, the product has to match. So by the time you cut the ribbon, before a single ticket has been sold, before a single beer has been poured, you have spent somewhere between $1 billion and $5.5 billion, and that is just to get in the door. Now let's talk about how you paid for it. Because nobody writes a check for $2 billion out of pocket. The capitalization table for a modern stadium looks something like this. You put in whatever direct equity you have, owner investment, cash from selling other assets, pre-sales of commercial rights before construction begins. Then you borrow the rest. And the rest is usually most of it. The borrowing comes in two main forms. Short-term bank loans from major sports finance institutions. Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Bank of America are the usual names to cover construction. Then, once the stadium is open and generating cash flows, that construction debt gets refinanced into long-term fixed-rate bonds, typically placed with American pension funds and institutional investors through what's called the U.S. private placement market. The beauty of this structure is that you can push your repayment dates decades into the future. Tottenham did exactly this. Their stadium debt, as of their 2025 accounts, consists of roughly £848 million in long-term bonds with a weighted average maturity of around 17 and a half years, including a 30-year tranche that doesn't fully mature until 2051. Their blended interest rate is 3.16%, which they locked in around 2019 when interest rates were near historic lows. That's the brilliant part of the Tottenham story. They borrowed at the right time. Their annual interest bill on that debt is around £30 million. Manchester United, trying to do something similar right now in 2026, is operating in a completely different interest rate environment. Estimates from financial analysts covering the club suggest that equivalent stadium bonds today would price at somewhere between 7 and 7.5%, more than double what Tottenham paid. On a £2 billion facility, that difference is not cosmetic. At 3%, your annual interest is £60 million. At 7%, it's $140 million. That is the difference between a business that can breathe and one that is constantly gasping. Governments sometimes contribute. When stadiums are sold to municipalities as economic regeneration projects, local governments will issue tax-exempt bonds or provide direct subsidies. Historically, public money covered close to the entire cost of stadium construction in the 1970s. By the 2010s, that contribution had fallen to a median of around 44%. Today, the figure varies enormously by project and location, but public money still routinely runs into the hundreds of millions. All right, the stadium is built. The debt is in place. Now you have to make enough money to justify all of it. Let's start with the most obvious revenue stream: ticket sales. A full stadium of 60,000 people at an average ticket price of $80 generates $4.8 million in a single match. That sounds enormous. Across a typical Premier League season with 19 home games, that's around $90 million at the gate. Across an NFL season with 8 to 10 home games, it's more like $48 million. But here's the first thing most people get wrong about stadium economics. Revenue is not profit. Every single dollar of that gate money has a cost attached to it. On a Premier League match day, you are paying for police and private security, thousands of officers and stewards to manage 60,000 people. You're paying for medical staff and paramedics on standby. You're paying for the ticketing personnel at every gate. You're paying for cleaning crews that will spend hours after the final whistle shoveling tons of rubbish off the concourses. You're paying for all the utilities: every floodlight, every HVAC system, every concession kitchen running at full power simultaneously. You're paying for temporary workers in the food stands, the merchandise stores, the premium hospitality suites. A single match day, before you've counted any of the actual football-related costs, costs you hundreds of thousands of dollars just to operate. But the ticket money itself doesn't go entirely to you either. In the Premier League, domestic cupgate receipts are shared with the visiting club and the Football Association. In the NFL, visiting teams receive a share of gate revenue under league revenue sharing rules. And there is a subtler problem with tickets that most stadium owners discover too late. An empty seat is not a zero. An empty seat is a negative. Here is why. When a fan buys a ticket and walks into your stadium, their spending does not stop at the gate. The average Premier League fan spends additional money on parking, on food and drink inside the stadium, on merchandise. In premium stadium models, that ancillary spending, everything beyond the ticket price, runs to somewhere between $40 and $85 per head. If 15,000 seats go unsold on a given match day, you have not just lost the ticket revenue. You've lost $120 million in potential ancillary income across a season. Empty seats are expensive. This brings us to what actually generates serious money in a modern stadium: the premium hospitality tier. Most people think of a football stadium as a place where people sit in rows and watch a game. That is true of 85 to 90% of the seats. But the other 10 to 15%, the luxury boxes, the premium hospitality lounges, the VIP club memberships, that tiny slice of the building generates roughly half of the total ticketing income. The math on this is extraordinary. A general admission ticket at Arsenal's Emirates Stadium might cost £80 for a Premier League match. The premium hospitality experience at the same stadium costs up to £6,500 per person. That is more than 80 times the price of a standard seat for a single game. And companies pay it. They pay it because they are bringing clients, closing deals, rewarding executives. In many jurisdictions, companies can write off up to 50% of corporate hospitality costs as legitimate business entertainment expenses. So the effective cost to the company is even lower. At Tottenham, their most exclusive club membership, called the Tunnel Club, which places guests behind one-way glass directly next to the player tunnel, is priced from £19,875 per seat per season. That is around $25,000 a year per seat, not for the whole box, per individual seat. And because these suites and memberships are sold on 3 to 7 year contracts, they provide something a football club normally never has: predictable, stable, multi-year cash flows that do not swing when the team loses 3 games in a row. This is the hidden engine of stadium economics. A bad run of form will empty the general admission waitlist. It will not cancel the corporate hospitality contracts. Those companies have signed legal agreements. Now let's talk about something even more reliable than match day income: selling your stadium's name. Major corporations pay millions of dollars every single year for the right to have their name on the outside of your building. Not for their products to be sold inside, not for their logo on a scoreboard, just to be called something. Emirates Stadium, SoFi Stadium, Allianz Arena. In the United States, spending on venue naming rights across the 7 major professional sports leagues has now reached close to $900 million annually. The NFL leads the way. The average NFL naming rights deal is worth nearly $10 million per year. SoFi's deal with the stadium in Inglewood, 20-year contract signed in 2019, is worth more than $20 million a year. In European football, naming rights have historically been underutilized, with less than a third of Premier League clubs having a naming rights deal of any kind compared to more than 80% of NFL teams. But that is changing. Arsenal's deal with Emirates, the one that gave the stadium its name, is one of the most recognized partnerships in world football. Barcelona sold the naming rights of the Camp Nou to Spotify for €20 million a year. Bayer Leverkusen's deal with Bayer AG, the pharmaceutical company that the club takes its name from, is worth €30 million annually. Atletico Madrid signed a 9-year deal with Riyadh Air worth roughly €10 million per season. Why do corporations pay this? Because every single time a match is broadcast anywhere in the world, every time a journalist writes about the venue, every time someone searches for directions to the stadium, the corporate name appears. It is advertising that cannot be skipped, cannot be muted, and is associated with a tribe of passionate, emotionally engaged consumers. Valuation analysts at Kroll estimated that Old Trafford's naming rights, if sold today, would be worth around $16.7 million per season, and that a brand new stadium on the same site could command close to double that. That is money that hits your bank account regardless of whether your team wins a single game. But we need to talk about what happens inside the stadium that is not football, because this is where the modern stadium model actually separates the winners from the losers. A traditional football stadium is dark about 340 days a year. 19 home league games in the Premier League, a few cup games, maybe some European nights. Call it 25 to 30 days of actual football. For the remaining 335 days, you still own a massive building with enormous running costs and a debt obligation that does not pause because there is no match today. The smartest stadium operators in the world figured out the solution to this problem. Turn the stadium into something that generates revenue every single week of the year: concerts. The Tottenham Hotspur Stadium has become one of the United Kingdom's most significant large-venue concert destinations. Their 2025 financial results revealed that income from non-football events, including concerts, NFL games, and boxing, reached £77.3 million in a single year. To put that in context, Chelsea Football Club's total football matchday revenue for the same period was £80 million. Spurs generated almost as much from concerts and NFL games as Chelsea made from all their football matches combined. Wembley Stadium, the national stadium of England and the largest in the United Kingdom, provides another useful benchmark. In the year to July 2025, Wembley hosted 42 major events, including 15 concerts. Their corporate hospitality product alone generated £39.8 million. Events revenue across all 42 occasions generated £74 million on top of that NFL games in the UK. This is something worth understanding. The NFL has played regular season games at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium since 2019. Tottenham Stadium was designed from the ground up to accommodate American football. It has a separate synthetic turf surface that rolls out from beneath the natural grass pitch. That design decision, which cost a significant amount up front, now generates tens of millions of pounds per NFL season in hosting fees, hospitality, and commercial partnerships. Boxing. The stadium boxing model places a ring in the center of the pitch and sells tickets to every angle. Capacity for these events often exceeds the standard football configuration. The commercial return per event is substantial, but there is a cost to all this versatility that people rarely discuss. When you host a concert in a stadium built for football, the heavy staging equipment and tens of thousands of concertgoers standing on the turf will destroy it. The solution is a retractable pitch. The Tottenham Hotspur Stadium moves its natural turf on 3 steel trays, each weighing thousands of tons, which slide beneath the south stand when the pitch needs to clear for another event. The Santiago Bernabeu's system lowers the turf in 6 sections into a climate-controlled underground chamber 25 to 30 meters below the playing surface. Equipped with its own grow lights, ventilation, and irrigation system, these are engineering masterpieces. They are also the reason that Real Madrid, in the 2 seasons after installing their retractable pitch, saw 7 of their core first-team players suffer serious knee injuries. The rigid steel plate beneath the shallow turf substrate does not absorb rotational force the same way a deep natural soil profile does. The injury science is contested, but the pattern is documented. Then there are the running costs that nobody thinks about until they own the building. A modern stadium uses between 7 and 15 million kilowatt hours of electricity per year. On a single match day, it burns through 50,000 to 70,000 kilowatt hours in roughly 10 hours, equivalent to the monthly electricity consumption of 60 average homes compressed into a single afternoon. The HVAC systems alone, heating and cooling the seating bowl, the luxury suites, the concourses, and the locker rooms, represent 35 to 45% of total energy consumption. The floodlights are another 15 to 20%. And then there's the scoreboard, the Wi-Fi network, the point-of-sale systems, the broadcast compound, concession stand refrigerators, all running simultaneously the grass. A professional football pitch consumes around 18,000 tons of water per year through irrigation alone. Because stadium stands cast enormous shadows over the pitch, blocking natural sunlight, groundskeepers deploy massive artificial grow lighting rigs, industrial-scale arrays of high-powered LED lights that are wheeled onto the pitch and run continuously through winter months to keep the grass alive. Running a single high-powered grow light array costs roughly $185 per 12-hour cycle at commercial electricity tariffs. Running enough of them to cover an entire pitch all winter adds hundreds of thousands of dollars to the annual utility bill. And even with all of this care, the turf surface may need to be completely relaid every 1 to 2 seasons at a cost of up to $1.2 million per replacement. Then there are insurance premiums, commercial liability, structural coverage, event cancellation policies. These cost millions annually and price in risks ranging from crowd injuries to extreme weather events to structural failures. There is year-round staff, groundskeepers, facilities engineers, IT security specialists, executive management, commercial operations teams, all paid regardless of whether the season is on or off. And rolling technology upgrade costs, because a ticketing system or a point-of-sale network that is 3 years old in the sports industry is already becoming obsolete. Let's talk about debt, specifically, and what happens to a stadium when the money stops flowing. Stadiums are financed with long-term loans governed by strict legal contracts called debt covenants. These covenants require the borrower, the club, to maintain specific financial health ratios. The most common is something called the debt service coverage ratio. In plain English, this means your operating cash flows have to remain at a certain multiple of your annual debt repayments. If your revenue falls below a threshold, the lender can legally classify you as in technical default, step up your interest rate by 1 to 3%, restrict your ability to spend money on players, or in extreme cases, demand immediate repayment of the entire outstanding loan balance. What can trigger this? Failing to qualify for European competitions. Relegation to a lower division. A global pandemic that empties stadiums for 18 months, Tottenham is the clearest current example of a club walking this financial tightrope. They built a transformational stadium, and it is genuinely brilliant. Record commercial revenue of £277 million in 2025, matchday revenue of £126.5 million, total club revenue of £565 million, a new club record. And yet the club recorded a loss after tax of £94 million in 2025. Because the depreciation on a £1 billion stadium, the amortization of player contracts, and the annual interest payments on over £1 billion of debt consume revenue faster than it arrives. And when the club narrowly avoided relegation in early 2026, genuinely nearly going down, the financial analysis was stark. Relegation would have meant a potential revenue drop of £200 to £250 million in a single year. On a club that already has over £1 billion of debt, Manchester United is planning to build something even larger. Their projected new stadium, 100,000 seats, is expected to cost somewhere between £2 and £3 billion. Their current total net debt is already over £1 billion. Their annual interest payments on existing debt already exceed £30 million. Analysts covering the project estimate that the interest on the stadium debt alone, at current market rates, would be approximately 130 to 150 million pounds per year, every single year. Before the stadium earns a single dollar, their current total operating cash flow does not cover that. Valencia's half-built new Mestalla Stadium is the nightmare scenario made visible. Valencia began construction in 2007. They ran out of money in 2009 and stopped. A concrete skeleton sat abandoned in the middle of Valencia for 16 years, a monument to how badly this can go wrong. Construction only resumed in January 2025 after a complex $345 million rescue financing package arranged by Goldman Sachs and La Liga. The stadium is now scheduled to open in 2027, 20 years after the first shovel went in. Here is what the economics actually look like when they work and when they don't, the optimistic scenario. Your stadium is in a major global city, London, New York, Los Angeles. You have a strong team in the top division, generating European competition revenue on top of domestic broadcasting distributions. Your corporate hospitality suites are fully leased on multi-year contracts. You've sold naming rights for $15 to $20 million per year. You host 6 to 8 concerts annually, each generating several million dollars in events income. You host 2 NFL games per year. Your match day revenue across 25 to 30 home fixtures runs to $120 million. Your commercial revenue from sponsorships, naming rights, and non-football events runs to another $200 million. Total annual revenue, somewhere around $350 million to $400 million. Annual debt service, $30 to $60 million at favorable rates. Annual operating costs, $150 to $200 million. Net, a workable business. You pay down your construction debt over 15 to 20 years. The realistic scenario. Your team has a mediocre season, finishes mid-table, misses European competition. Your broadcast income drops by $30 to $40 million in a single year. Concert bookings for the summer season were softer than expected. 2 artists canceled due to scheduling conflicts. That's $10 million gone. Your naming rights deal is up for renewal, and the market has moved against you, so you renew for less. Meanwhile, your debt covenants don't adjust for any of this. Your interest rate steps up 1% because your coverage ratio dipped. Now you're paying an extra 8 to 10 million interest charges for the year. A player gets injured, you have to buy a replacement, your transfer debt increases. The year ends with a loss of $80 to $100 million. The difference between a good year and a bad year, in a stadium business, is not $30 million. It can be $150 million. That gap is what stadium finance is actually about. The smartest operators in this business figured out something fundamental. The goal is not to own a place where football happens. The goal is to own a year-round commercial district where football is the anchor. The Atlanta Braves built Truist Park in 2017 as the center of a $400 million mixed-use campus called the Battery Atlanta. Surrounding the stadium is high street retail, restaurants, hotels, corporate office space, and residential apartments, all owned by the Braves organization. They record $67 million in annual recurring real estate revenues directly from that district. Money that has nothing to do with whether the team wins or loses. The area commands a 20% lease premium compared to the broader municipal market. The Tottenham Hotspur Stadium was designed as a destination, not a venue. The retractable pitch, the NFL infrastructure, the dedicated concert layout, these were not afterthoughts. They were the business plan. And the £77 million in non-football revenue they generated in 2025, in a year where the football team almost got relegated, is the proof that the plan works. The stadiums that fail are the ones that were built as concrete bowls with seats pointed at a pitch, which sit dark for 330 days a year, with a debt obligation that runs every single day of all 365. So if you do decide to buy or build a football stadium, here is what you need to understand. You are not buying a sports venue. You are buying a commercial property business with a sports club attached. The football gives the building meaning, fills it with passion, and delivers the crowd that makes everything else possible. But football alone, 19 home games, 60,000 tickets, the beer and the scarves, cannot service the debt on a modern stadium. You need the concerts, you need the naming rights, you need the VIP suites on 7-year contracts, you need the NFL, the boxing, the tourism revenue, the year-round real estate around the perimeter. Get those right, and the stadium is a machine that prints money in ways that no football result can touch. Get them wrong, and you own an extremely expensive building that is empty more than 90% of the year, with a lender on the phone asking about your coverage ratio. The 90 minutes of football that everyone comes to see? That's just the opening act.